think the underlying challenge here to be addressed is that South Africa has a pressing need for more high-quality graduates. It's a phenomenon around the world that with the way society is going, we need higher levels of educatedness in the country. But unfortunately, we are not doing well in achieving this aim, apart from some areas of excellence. And I would like to stress that this is not just a problem for higher education, but it affects so many aspects of our life and the development of our country, and indeed the future of our whole education system, because it takes graduates to run. I'd like just to correct a couple of misunderstandings and myths, I think, in this area. First of all, it's a long-standing problem. It's been going back, in fact, to the 1960s at least, and it's been exacerbated, though, by growth in the system, by changes in national and global circumstances, to the point that it has now become far more pressing. The second thing is that it affects students from all race groups, though it's true that because of general levels of poverty and other issues, it affects the black and coloured communities more. The third thing is that, of course, it is strongly affected by poverty in the country generally, bad socioeconomic conditions, and bad schooling. That is absolutely true, but it's exacerbated by the fact that higher education is using outdated structures, which were inherited, in fact, almost a century ago in the colonial era, and that are not in line with our current realities. If you would let me, I'll just explain a little bit more about this. Again, it's a myth here that our system is full of so-called weak students. That really is not true. We have very low participation rates in higher education by world standards and also by the standards of comparator countries. The numbers don't matter much, but our what is called the gross enrollment rate is around 17%, whereas in the first world it can go up to 90%, and in comparator countries it's often around 30%, so we are definitely lagging behind. It is also racially skewed still, with white participation being 4 times as high as African and coloured, with the effect that really only about 10% of our African and coloured youth are getting into higher education at all. Now, this is a very bad thing, but it's also an important indicator that the students that we get into the system have a strong potential to succeed. They are our best achievers in the education system. And if we cannot do well with the top 10% of our majority population groups, then we have to ask serious questions about why. That's absolutely right, and we've been profoundly affected by our history in all ways, but it is quite interesting that those effects are not quite as predictable as one would think, and also that the reasons for them are not confined to the schooling area. By the way, may I just correct something that's been misunderstood in the press recently?
Yes, please.
In the last day or so. One of the figures we released was that, I said only about 10% of the youth of our majority population groups get into higher education. And the other critical figure was that under 5% of the youth succeed in any form of higher education. That is now being misinterpreted as only 5% of higher education students succeed. That's not the case. The actual, it's not, thank heavens, it's not as bad as that, but it's still bad. So if you look at, the brief facts here, that graduation in 5 years amongst our contact students, so I'm leaving UNISA out, because distance education students tend to take much longer, understandably. But if we look at contact students only, and that's about under 2/3 of our system, the overall rate of graduation in 5 years, and most of our degrees and diplomas are 3 years, is 48%. So we under half. African is 42%, because of those circumstances that you've referred to. But even whites, who are the best performing subsector, represent only 61% graduation rate. So more than 1/3, even of white students, don't graduate in 5 years. So we can say that no group is performing well, but certainly given our past, skewed funding, skewed access, etc., it is perfectly true that African and coloured students are least well served by our current system and most vulnerable to the big problems of poverty and poor schooling.